Hi again, Rick here with another Starship Lore video, 2 in 1 week. Well, anyway, this video is exploring the lore of the Obena class, which in many ways is another Excelsior variant, yet we soon after have the Excelsior 2, so what's the difference? Well, hopefully this video will cover that. Let's get started. In real life, the Obena class was created for Star Trek Lower Decks as the USS Archimedes, a far larger and more advanced vessel designed to outclass the Cerritos in comparison. The captain for the vessel was also a face that had appeared before in Star Trek The Next Generation, Sonia Gomez, for a couple of reasons. Mike McMahon, the showrunner for Lower Decks, stated that he wanted to bring back a character from TNG for continuity, but specifically a former Lower Decker style character to show that being so does not preclude them from achieving in the future. The class was named for designer Nolan Obena, and the vessel is exactly what it appears to be, a homage to the classic Excelsior, designed with newer elements more in keeping with the combination of the TNG film era and the Lower Decks style. However, it was not simply an Excelsior refit or overhaul. In an interview with Trek Yards, which I'll link below, Obena cites several concepts around the nacelle design and only 2 real options, one based on the Galaxy and one based on the Sovereign. Additional detailing was added by Marcelo Bonifacio. An interesting addition that gets discussed concerns the appearance of the Starfleet Delta on the underside of the hull, and that was placed there for a reason. The original idea was so that it could be readily identifiable for when it makes first contact with a new planet, and when viewed from the underside, like a planet looking up, the Starfleet insignia would be visible. The reason for it being the 2360s logo on the ship 2 decades later, however, well, that was chalked up to personal tastes of the crew, which I would add is quite believable considering its captain got her big break as an officer in this era on the Enterprise D. Could be a homage to that. So, stepping in the universe now to look at its origin. The Excelsior class was aging out with one last hurrah during the Dominion War, and by 2379 there were plans to replace it after almost 100 years in service. While the Excelsior 2 would become the ultimate successor, this does not emerge until the very end years of the 24th century, entering into the next. The project was begun and various development shipyard teams supplied their alternatives for what would be the next workhorse, and the Yoyodyne propulsion systems of Proxima Centauri drew up the Obena class. Their inspiration was simply to recreate the Excelsior but using the technology of the Sovereign class, and even drawing up the potential for the quantum slipstream drive that Voyager had returned with earlier that year. Construction was greenlit, and by 2381 the USS Obena NX 83000 was completed and ready for testing. Many of these systems were based on the Sovereign class, and it basically imported the same core warp systems, but undeniably resembled the Excelsior more. Additional fleet yards supplied further Obena ships, such as the Andorian Imperial Shipyard and the East Wind systems of Denobula. The vessel would do well in testing, the reliable Sovereign systems already a known commodity. However, the class would soon find a role outside of its created profile. Eventually it would settle into the role of a deep space exploration and survey craft, considering its high speeds, and this would see the line refit with newer and more advanced communications systems, along with higher resolution sensors befitting these distances. At least 2 more would be put into service in the same year, with the USS Archimedes NCC 83002 being under the new command of Captain Sonia Gomez. I don't have official measurements for the Obena class, however it looks to be around 550 to 600 metres long when compared to the California class starship, putting it on par with the Galaxy class in lengths, slightly shorter, if not width, as it had a much narrower profile. The Obena class's warp systems were very powerful, considering it seemed to draw on the same system as the Sovereign class. Therefore it could cruise at warp 7 and would achieve warp 9.988 as its absolute limit, which is slightly faster than the Sovereign was at its launch. The quantum slipstream drive was also added to the vessel as the initial testbed but its implementation was far from perfect. It allowed for short jaunts at this transwarp speed of about 13 minutes, but testing almost burnt out the drive, making its extended and frequent use an impossibility. Still, it was a promising technology that would later see its first true implementation on the Dauntless 3 years later, which featured the first fully working version. Propulsion was the name of the game here, which is expected when the primary designers were specialists in that field. It had a total of 5 impulse fusion reactors supplying its engines, meaning that it certainly had a kick at sublight speeds too. In terms of armament, it was equipped with standard phaser array systems, nothing too notable here, but its torpedo systems were actually optimised for quantum torpedo technology over photons, and it had internal factories to manufacture more when needed. This is unusual, as quantum torpedoes, while more powerful, are usually held back, probably due to some treaties or something. Photons, even after the emergence of the superior quantum devices, were far more commonly used, almost without limit, but not here. While originally created to test out the next phase of the quantum slipstream drive, what eventually emerged was a design that was pretty solid because it was based on the shoulders of giants. The Sovereign and Excelsior classes both lend their inspiration to the design, so it's unsurprising that the Obena ended up being a class that worked out. While its QSD might have not been the second coming of the transwarp project that Yoyodyne Systems would have hoped, it nonetheless amplified a stable design. That's really it for the Obena class. It worked, but honestly did little to push Starfleet forwards. Its systems were great because they had been extensively tested out on prior ships, and it did not innovate. Finding its main existence as an outward-heading survey vessel, it ended up departing for deep space missions frequently, as well as the occasional operations or science endeavours. Aside from its limited number, created around the early 2380s, it was rarely seen again. Although, as Excelsior classes were resigned, the Obena did step in to take up the slack as intended, but other classes also rose to prominence instead. In summary, this ship was a stopgap, and had it arrived on the scene a decade earlier, it would have found its place as a true replacement for the Excelsior, as it was supposed to be. Starfleet's reluctance to shelve the Excelsior, however, also ironically led to the partial invalidation of its immediate successor. The Obena class is a good ship, but being simply a good ship does not cut it when the next generation of design and innovation is right around the corner. Ultimately, this vessel too would fade from use and be replaced by the turn of the century, as newer standard systems far outclassed it. So that covers everything on the Obena class, one of several Excelsior replacements, and for a couple of decades it managed that, but it was fading from use by the 2390s and altogether replaced in the next decade. Still, it's a culmination of the Sovereign era technology, and emerged at the tail end of this time. Thanks for watching this breakdown of the Obena class, and until the next video, I've been Rick, and goodbye.